This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. The UN makes a $10 million pledge to fight swarms of locusts destroying crops across Eastern Africa at an alarming rate.
If you consider that hundreds of millions of them are flying at the same time, the amount of destruction they can cause is unimaginable.
The fear now is that damaged crops and a lack of food could lead to unrest. 1 year on since President Tshisekedi came to power in the Democratic Republic of Congo, we speak to him about what he's achieved.
Freedoms and rights of individuals are more secured, as well as the movement of goods and people.
Also in the program, it's Women's Work, the social enterprise helping more women across the continent make their mark in business. And in sports, rugby world champions South Africa have a new coach who will still answer to the old one. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Unprecedented and alarming. That's how the UN is describing the threat posed by huge swarms of desert locusts across East Africa and is pledging $10 million to tackle the crisis. Now, the insects have invaded about a dozen countries on both sides of the Red Sea, destroying crops. We'll be examining the response in a moment, but first, the BBC's senior Africa correspondent, Anne Soy, reports from northern Kenya, where locusts had not been seen for over half a century.
From a distance, it looks like northern Kenya is burning. But these are swarms of desert locusts spreading like wildfire across the Horn of Africa. Just one swarm can have more than 200 million insects.
These are tiny creatures flying above me. They look harmless. But if you consider that hundreds of millions of them are flying at the same time, the amount of destruction they can cause is unimaginable.
Ali Bila Wako tells me this is the second invasion of locusts he's witnessed in about 60 years. This time, he's lost nearly all his maize and bean crops.
It's painful. We had no rain for several years. When it did finally rain last year, we were so happy. But then these insects have come and destroyed our crop. We have incurred huge losses.
He says he brought dozens of people here to help ward off the invasion. Elsewhere, gunshots, tear gas, and whistles. People and governments across the region are desperate to save plants from being devoured.
Which way are they moving in? They're moving this way. Yeah.
Conservation groups are helping track the movement of the swarms.
The flying, the coordination, and the looking for the swarms is all aimed at helping the local people and helping the national government at least get to know where these things are.
The Kenyan and Ethiopian governments are using aerial spraying to try and kill the insects, but with little success. The impact, especially for pastoralists living in the affected area, could be serious.
What's your biggest fear?
Conflict. Once there is no food here, people will start migrating. If my grazing land had been destroyed by locusts, I will move to the next one, where I'm not wanted. So there might be conflict, which is not good. There might be even loss of lives.
A region devastated by years of drought seemed to have recovered when it received unusually heavy rains. But that has now brought this misery, leaving communities on the edge. Anne Soy, BBC News, Moyale.
So that's a picture in Kenya. The locusts began breeding in Yemen last year. It wasn't long before they moved across the Horn of Africa to parts of Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. Now, the insects are known to fly as much as 150 kilometers per day. The UN is describing it as the worst infestation in 25 years, and Uganda and South Sudan could be at risk. Well, Fatuma Said is the UN's Food and Agriculture representative in Ethiopia. She's been following developments closely and joins me from the capital, Addis Ababa. Thanks for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. Just paint us a picture of the kind of devastation that the locusts have caused in Ethiopia.
The locusts have unfortunately devastated large land in Ethiopia, both in the area of the pastoralists as well as for the farmers. They have entered the country from Yemen since this July this year, and unfortunately, due to the favorable weather, they have reproduced and increased very rapidly, and then even now moving, unfortunately, to Kenya and Somalia. This is something that we have been trying to work with the government to avoid, but now this has become a regional crisis.
We appear to have lost your picture there. All right, you are there actually. Yeah. Controlling locusts and large swarms at that is a really difficult job. Now we have the United Nations donating about $10 million. Will this do the work that's required?
This will definitely contribute to the required needs to really fight this war. This is like a war, but unfortunately, today what is needed is 70 million to control almost half a million hectares of land, and to support those people whose livelihood have been affected. So this 10 million from the United Nations is a great help, but unfortunately, it will not be sufficient.
Is there a way this invasion could have been stopped or prevented?
Yes, it could have been stopped. Countries have been struggling to control them, but unfortunately, their means have been stretched, and they could not control. What is causing the crisis today is those areas where they could not control and where the locusts have multiplied.
So what kind of food situation are we looking at? Because we understand now Uganda, South Sudan are also at risk.
Yes, this is the crucial moment. We need to control that, because if this is not controlled, the favorable wet conditions are going to allow them to be increasing at an exponential rate, and they can fly to Uganda and South Sudan. As you just said, a swarm can fly up to 150 kilometers a day. So these swarms, in few days, they can be in South Sudan and Uganda if they are not controlled.
All right, Fatuma Said, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. Thank you. Let's now take a quick look at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. Zimbabwe says its grain reserves have dwindled to just over 1 month's supply after one of the worst droughts in decades cut the country's maize harvests by 50%. Around half the population now faces food insecurity. The agriculture minister said there's only 100,000 tons of grain in reserve, but the country will need 8 times as much this year. Isabel dos Santos says she plans to sue the Angolan government over accusations of corruption, which she denies. Africa's richest woman maintains the accusations are false and politically motivated. She's been accused of mismanagement and misappropriation of funds while she was head of Angola's State Oil Corporation. The Chinese authorities have expanded quarantine to limit the spread of the deadly coronavirus to 13 cities. 26 people have died from the virus and 800 logged so far. The US has confirmed a second case, with half a dozen countries around the world now affected. They are putting extra security measures in place. Now, 1 year ago today, Felix Tshisekedi became president of the Democratic Republic of Congo in the country's first ever peaceful transfer of power. Mr. Tshisekedi promised change with radical reforms to ease poverty and tackle corruption. But how successful has he been? In eastern DRC, attacks by militants and rebel groups are increasing in an area struggling with an Ebola outbreak. In a moment, we'll hear from the president himself, but first, Gaius Kowene looks at his first 12 months.
History in the making. For the first time a year ago, a president took power from another one in the Democratic Republic of Congo through ballot boxes, not war. But things have not been straightforward for President Tshisekedi. Former President Joseph Kabila's coalition holds the majority in both chambers of parliament. President Tshisekedi has had to form an alliance with them. It took 7 months of hard negotiations before the country could even have a government. Some fear Tshisekedi might have his hands tied.
There is a way from the past that doesn't allow President Tshisekedi to work well. This is a serious problem we are concerned about. When you look at the years remaining for his term, this is a real impediment.
At the same time, the country is still battling its 10th and deadliest Ebola outbreak for more than a year, alongside the world's worst measles epidemic, which has killed more than 6,000 people. Implementing free basic education and launching infrastructure projects are some of the president's successes. However, promises to pacify the eastern part of the country and fight corruption have yet to yield results. For President Tshisekedi's team, 1 year is not enough to fix the root causes of the country's problems.
Les défis sont véritablement nombreux. C'est quelque chose
There are many challenges. We are already seeing some results, but let's give this government time to go as far as it can. Of course, there are things that need to be corrected. We are working on that.
During most of his first year in power, President Tshisekedi has traveled to numerous countries with the aim of reinforcing diplomatic ties and also to seek funds for his projects. Expectations are high. Gaius Koene, BBC News, Kinshasa.
So let's look at whether Mr. Tshisekedi is meeting those expectations. He was in London this week, and BBC Afrique's Nicolas Negus asked him what he thought he'd achieved during his first year in office.
I went very quickly into what I called the emergency program with very little means. Building schools, restoring hospitals, roads, bridges, setting up ferries to facilitate river traffic. And on the political level, we have eased the tensions. No more prisons for political actors, no more political exiles. Freedoms and rights of individuals are more secured, as well as the movement of goods and people.
Congolese people want to understand why they still struggle to live, while DRC is one of the richest African countries. How can you explain?
I believe that there have been several phenomena, political because of strong regimes that were not very democratic, but also because of mismanagement, bad governance, and I would also say by a lack of transparency.
You have been a year in power. What can you tell us about your relationship with Joseph Kabila?
First of all, I do not believe that Joseph Kabila must be a prisoner, so we have the right to see him. We have never seen in our country, in the history of our country, a transition or a peaceful political transition of power. And so for most people, it is unreal, the spectacle of a president coming from the opposition, and not the least the most radical opposition coming to power. This is a scenario never seen before in our country.
Your opponents say that he's still the one controlling the country.
It is normal that people speculate. But at the same time, I believe Mr. Joseph Kabila has the right to freedom of movement. He has the right to continue to meet his political friends. I do not see how that hinders my way of governing.
Mr. President, you came here in London to take part to the UK-Africa Investment Summit to try to gather investors in DRC. How can you succeed when the east of the country is full of rebels?
Good question. If I had the answer, I would give it to you right away. But believe me, it's not easy at all. It is a situation that has been going on for 2 decades now. So during my election campaign, I had the opportunity to go in these regions, and I was struck by this very situation, which really hurt me a lot. I made a commitment at that time to do everything I could to bring peace, and since then I have instructed the chief of our armed forces to establish his headquarters in Beni until peace is finally restored.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, the Champions League continues this weekend. We preview tonight's 2 games. I'm Sophie Ikenya and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top story on this program, the UN makes a $10 million pledge to fight swarms of locusts destroying crops across Eastern Africa at an alarming rate. Now, we've been reporting this week on the UK-Africa summit that took place here in London. It was a chance for heads of state and business leaders to look at new investment opportunities. But away from the headlines, a key focus of the summit was African female entrepreneurs. Women are increasingly making their presence felt in all sectors across the continent, but they still face obstacles. Now, Lisa Marie Mishtak is here to explain. Lisa.
Thank you, Sophie. Well, sub-Saharan Africa boasts the world's highest rate of women entrepreneurs, but they can face many barriers to get the funding needed to grow their businesses. It's estimated there's a $42 billion financing gap for African women compared to men. That means they can struggle to stay afloat. Well, as a result of this lack of investment, female-owned enterprises post monthly profits that are on average 38% lower than those of male-owned businesses. But according to the African Development Bank, women are reliable as they pay back 98% of their loans. I went along to one of the events that was put on by the UK's Department of International Trade and the Lionesses of Africa, a social enterprise that helps connect African female entrepreneurs with investors. Over the course of the night, 14 female entrepreneurs from 8 African countries took to the stage in London to pitch their businesses to a room of over 250 people. It's with the aim to secure investment to grow their companies. The event is part of the government's plan to strengthen the partnership between the UK and Africa.
It's really important for us not just to bring sort of capital funding into Africa, but crucially to understand the innovations that are happening on the African continent, which we think actually apply to the UK as well. So it's about investing in Africa's entrepreneurs to help them grow those businesses so they can take their products and services to the world, including the UK.
To be able to talk to
Kenyan business owner Susie Wakabi believes events such as this provide entrepreneurs access to investment that they wouldn't get at home.
The impact I'm positive it will have is just like amazing. We don't get these opportunities. Nobody's flocking into Kenya to put in investments. So just having a room full of potentials is incredible.
Not having access to traditional forms of collateral and guarantees often limits the loan amount women can apply for. Having the right support network and partners is seen as a crucial element for success.
As we all know, if you really want to do something at scale, you have to have the right partners to do it with. And for us, as many entrepreneurs in our Lioness of Africa network will tell you, the UK is a really important marketplace. We actually need to work with really good strategic partners who will really help us to provide the right sort of platform, the right sort of access, the right sort of introductions, the right sort of mechanism to connect these women to really exciting marketplaces.
By creating more opportunities for women to boost their income, it's estimated that it could add $12 trillion to the value of the global economy by 2025.
So I invite all of you to join on the conversation afterwards. Thank you.
And with Africa having the highest concentration of female entrepreneurs, new avenues for investment will promote better economic growth for the continent. Lisa Marie Mishtak, BBC News.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport. Peter.
Many thanks, Sophie. And rugby's world champion South Africa have a new coach. Jacques Neineba was named as the new Springbok coach on Friday and replaces Rassie Erasmus. Neineba was an assistant to Erasmus when the team won the World Cup last year and will still report directly to Erasmus in his role as director of rugby, which places him in charge of all national male and female teams. Now, Liverpool will assess Sadio Mane after the forward suffered a hamstring injury in their 2-1 win over Wolves. The Senegal forward limped off in the first half and was replaced by Premier League debutant Takumi Minamino. The Reds face 3 games in the next days with an FA Cup trip to Shrewsbury on Sunday. Mane's 2018-2019 season lasted 363 days from the first day of pre-season training to the final of the Africa Cup of Nations, and it's been followed by another grueling campaign so far. Now, there are two matches in the Champions League tonight. It's the 5th round of the league group stage. Wydad Casablanca will face Algeria's USM Alger in Casablanca. Wydad, seen here in training, hope to maintain second spot with 9 points and also book a place in the quarterfinals. Both teams are in Group C, which includes Sundowns, who lead with 10 points, and USM Alger, who have only 2 points. On Tuesday, Wydad appointed Frenchman Sébastien Desabre asked their new coach to replace Serbian coach Zoran Manijolovic. This will be his second spell with the club.
On prépare bien sûr ce match avec beaucoup d'envie.
We know that we will have in front of us a good team in USM Algiers that must really win to continue in the competition. So these are tactical elements that we know. We know this team well because we have observed it well and we prepared as seriously as possible to be efficient tomorrow evening.
Well, in tonight's other game, Egypt's Zamalek face a tough mission as they host Congolese side TP Mazembe at El Salam Stadium. They are currently in second place in Group A on 7 points, 3 behind TP Mazembe, and need 2 points from the remaining 2 games to secure their place in the quarterfinals.
Ils sont eux déjà qualifiés pour les quarts de finale, ce qui n'est pas notre cas.
TP Mazembe is already qualified to the quarterfinals, and we still haven't. And to win against a team like Mazembe, home or away, you have to give a high-class performance. So we're taking this seriously and keeping our heads in the game 100%.
Well, as you heard, the TP Mazembe have already qualified for the competition top 8 after claiming a 2-1 win at home against Primeiro do Agosto of Angola 2 weeks ago. They also silenced the White Knights 3-0 in Lubumbashi in the group opener in November before continuing their winning run in the group stage to put themselves in contention for the title.
I think the first leg when we played Zamalek, it was a good game. It wasn't easy for us. We pushed it until we got the goals. The goals we got, we tried our chances, which we gave us the victory. So I think the most important is to utilize the chances when you have, especially on an international level, because we don't have many chances in the game to come. So if you have 3 or 2 chances at an international level, you have to utilize the game.
Finally, Tunisia's Ons Jabeur is through to the next round of the Australian Open after beating former world #1 Caroline Wozniacki 7-5, 3-6, 7-5. The match was also Wozniacki's last as a professional tennis player as she announced her retirement. Sophie, that's your sports.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Now, in Kenya, a rare species of osprey that has migrated from Finland and flown over 6,000 kilometers is being cared for after it was found stuck in a fishing net in the waters of Lake Kanyaboli in western Kenya. Now, the Kenya Wildlife Service said the fish-eating bird of prey was found with some bruises on its leg and was dehydrated, but otherwise it was in good health. Now, the origin of the osprey was confirmed from a reference ring on its leg, which showed it came from Finland. Now, a fashion fast in the French capital, Cameroonian designer Imane Ayesi is the first representative from sub-Saharan Africa to show a collection during Paris Fashion Week. Now, Mr. Ayesi called it an honor, although the French fashion establishment took over 2 decades to allow him to showcase his work at the epicenter of haute couture. Of course, don't forget you can get in touch with me and the rest of the Focus on Africa team on social media. I'm at Kenya. And of course, any other story you want to get updated on our website, that's bbc.com/Africa. That's Focus on Africa for now. Thanks for your company.